The Chaos Gods, also known as the Ruinous Powers and the Primordial Annihilator, are powerful entities that dwell in the depths of the Immaterium, a plane of reality which is also known as warp space or the realm of chaos. While a multitude of Chaos Gods are known to exist within the warp, none are more powerful or influential than the four beings known collectively as the Prime Chaos Gods. Khorne, the god of bloodshed, rage and murder. Tzeentch, the god of magic, change and deception. Nurgle, the god of decay, pestilence and despair, and Slaanesh, the god of pleasure, excess and suffering. While the warp itself is generally considered to be an unending, churning morass of psychic energy, the four prime Chaos Gods will go on to create their own vast and distinctly unique realms within its depths, with the domain of each god becoming what is essentially an island of stability within the eternal, formless wastes. It is within the very heart of their domains that each of these four gods is said to dwell, and while the abode of each god is protected from unwelcome visitors, the ruinous powers will seek to secure their homes in vastly different ways. For instance, the impossible fortress of Tzeentch lies within the centre of a vast crystalline labyrinth, one that even demons find near impossible to solve, while the brass citadel of Khorne is guarded by vast armies of demonic entities, who will destroy any who seek to breach the heart of the Blood God's domain. While many of the Chaos Gods will seek to deter and dissuade any potential intruders from attempting to reach their seat of power, Slaanesh by contrast frequently seeks to entice visitors into their realm, so that they may become enraptured by her twisted pleasures for all of eternity. Within the realm of Slaanesh, surrounding the god's very palace, are 6 subdomains that are known as the Circles of Seduction, with each one representing a different pleasure or vice: avidity, gluttony, carnality, paramounty, vainglory, and indolency. In order to reach the Palace of Slaanesh, a potential intruder has to successfully pass through each of these circles in turn, a task that is all but impossible for mortals to accomplish. However, one individual in particular would not only accomplish such a monumental feat, but would also succeed in making their way into the very heart of the Pleasure God's throne room, a silver-armoured warrior of the Adeptus Astartes known simply as the Knight. This knight, who was described as having a will as strong as adamantium, would pass through each concentric circle in turn, refusing to succumb to temptation until he reached the interior of Slaanesh's palace. Upon entering the palace, the Astartes would come face to face with Slaanesh themselves, who had taken the guise of a youthful yet beautifully androgynous man. Seeking to strike down the Chaos God, the Astartes would draw his rune-etched blade, only to hesitate at the last moment. In this moment of doubt, the Space Marine would finally succumb to the temptations of Slaanesh, kneeling before the Chaos God and bowing their head in subservience. Slaanesh would then knight the Astartes by touching each of his shoulders in turn with their scepter, and with this act, the knight would be forever damned. While this knight may be the most famous or rather infamous individual to ever set foot within the Pleasure God's domain, one question still needs to be asked. Just who exactly was this particular Astartes? As detailed within the 8th edition Demon's Codex, this particular Space Marine was stated to have been clad in what was described as silvered armour. While this particular piece of information may indeed narrow down the list of potential candidates by a significant degree, there still exists a multitude of Space Marine chapters whose warriors are clad in armour that is predominantly silver in coloration, such as the Angels of Iron, Doom Eagles, Silver Skulls, and the Guardians of the Covenant. However, because the Space Marine that enters Slaanesh's domain was constantly referred to as being a knight, then it would seem somewhat plausible to assume that this particular Astartes hailed from a chapter whose name contained the word knight within it. With this in mind, in conjunction with the warrior's silvery armour, it's logical to assume that the knight in question could have hailed from either the Iron Knights, Knights of Blood, Knights of the Raven, or even the Grey Knights. Given that this Silver Knight was able to traverse all 6 circles of seduction and resist the various temptations offered to him throughout his journey, it would appear that this knight in particular was in fact a Grey Knight. Indeed, The Grey Knights, as a chapter that specializes in combating against the servants of the ruinous powers and demonic entities in particular, are well known and lauded for both their iron resolve and spiritual fortitude, making them incredibly resistant to the corrupting influence of chaos to the point where the chapter's warriors are said to be all but incorruptible. If this warrior were indeed a Grey Knight, then it's even possible that he may have once been a part of the Purifier Order, warriors who, even by the standards of the Grey Knights, are said to be staunchly resistant to the temptations offered by demons. The spiritual fortitude demonstrated by the Purifiers is so great that they are even capable of radiating a powerful cleansing aura, which is described as being anathema to demonic entities, one which shields both their bodies and souls with an intense psychic flame. The idea of the Silver Knight of Slaanesh being formerly of the Grey Knights chapter is also loosely supported within the 8th edition Demon's Codex, for as detailed with the following passage, the Silver Knight was himself compared to none other than a pure flame.
Even the purest flame can be extinguished by the tide. In that single moment of doubt, the Wanderer was lost.
While the idea of a Grey Knight succumbing to chaotic corruption may appear somewhat absurd, it is important to note that there is a difference between resisting the temptations offered by lesser or even greater demons and those offered by a fully fledged god. This is due to the simple fact that Slaanesh, despite being regarded by many as being the weakest prime chaos god, is still an absurdly powerful entity whose power far exceeds that of both lesser and greater demons alike. But even then, the corrupting influence exuded by certain demonic entities, such as that displayed by the entity bound within the Blade of Antweir, can be so intense that to resist the various temptations and offers made by such beings is shown to be both a mentally and spiritually demanding task, even to the members of the Purifier Order. But if the Silver Knight that bowed before Slaanesh was truly a Grey Knight, is it possible to ascertain his very identity? As it stands, there are two potential candidates in this regard. The first of which is that the Silver Knight of Slaanesh is none other than the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights chapter, Kaldor Drago. While this may initially appear to be incredibly unlikely, there is a surprising amount of circumstantial evidence to support such a possibility. The first of which is that Drago was himself cursed to wander throughout the realm of chaos after an encounter with the demon prince, Makkar the Reborn. Despite being trapped within the warp, Drago would continue to wage his war against the chaos gods and their demonic minions, and would accomplish many seemingly impossible feats in the process, such as destroying the fortress of the Lord of Change known as Makachin, and even setting fire to a significant portion of Nurgle's garden. However, much like the demonic servants of the Chaos Gods, Drago himself is able to manifest within the material universe for short periods of time, before ultimately being dragged back into the depths of warp space. Not only is Drago known to be currently wandering throughout the realm of chaos, but much like the Silver Knight that fell to Slaanesh, is armed with a rune-etched blade, the Titan Sword. The Titan Sword is an ancient and incredibly powerful Nemesis Force sword, which is not only capable of truly slaying demonic entities, but has inscribed upon its length the very rune of the Imperial Inquisition. Since Drago has performed many extraordinary feats during his time within the realm of chaos, it would stand to reason that he may have, at some point, attempted to strike a decisive blow against the Chaos Gods by striking one of them down. If Drago would indeed dare to attempt such a seemingly impossible mission, then it would make some degree of sense to begin by first attempting to slay Slaanesh, who, as mentioned earlier, is commonly regarded as being the weakest of the four major Chaos Gods. Despite being supposedly weaker than her contemporaries, Slaanesh's power would nonetheless exceed the limits of mortal comprehension, allowing her to subjugate even the purest of souls that are brought before her presence. While the idea of Drago being the Silver Knight of Slaanesh is indeed an interesting one, there are a number of problems with this particular possibility. This is mainly due to the fact that Drago, whenever he manifests within the material realm, appears to be both utterly uncorrupted and completely free of chaotic taint, and continues to display his nigh unmatched spiritual purity in the face of demonic entities, despite his prolonged exposure to the energies of the warp. In addition, Drago himself is known to battle fiercely against the servants of the ruinous powers, including those affiliated with Slaanesh, suggesting that the Grey Knight is indeed untainted and unclaimed by the Chaos God. That being said, however, perhaps Slaanesh had managed to transform Drago into something akin to that of a sleeper agent, waiting for the right moment to strike against a particular foe, or perhaps given the time-distorting properties of warp space, which allows the past, present, and future to converge all at once, Drago has simply yet to make his journey into the heart of Slaanesh's realm, and is in fact destined to do so at some point in the far future. In either case, if the Silver Knight of Slaanesh is not Khaldor Drago, there is a second potential candidate in this regard, a warrior of the Purifier Order named Drake, the Knight of the Flame. Within the novel Castellan, Drake, alongside Garen Crow, the Warden of the Blade of Antwyr, would battle against the demon known as the Mask of Slaanesh as she sought to enact a plan to destroy an entire planetary system by altering the orbits of its worlds into that of an erratic dance. During the course of their battle, the Mask would use her powers to control the very movements of the Grey Knights, even forcing Drake to put a storm bolter to his head in an attempt to kill him. Drake would eventually distract the demon, allowing Crow the chance to escape the demon's grasp. After Drake had been slowly and brutally rent asunder with the sound of tearing metal, Crow would use the Blade of Antwyr to shatter the Mask's scepter, unleashing an intense blast of energy that not only threw the Grey Knight back with incredible force, but banished the demon back into the depths of the warp. When Crow regained consciousness, he would scour the area for signs of his battle brother, for despite hearing Drake's cries of agony, he did not see the exact fate that befell the Knight of the Flame. Crow would discover the shattered remains of Drake's armor, but no trace of his battle brother's body or sword could be found. Because of this, it's possible that Drake himself could have been dragged back into the depths of the warp when the Mask was banished from the material realm. Since the Mask is a demon of Slaanesh, it would seem logical to assume that, upon being banished, she would have returned to the domain of Slaanesh specifically, although given the unpredictable nature of the warp, this is purely an assumption. If Drake had found himself within the realm of chaos, it's possible that he could have made his journey to the Palace of Slaanesh in an attempt to strike down the Chaos God, or perhaps the Knight of the Flame may have instead sought to hunt down the Mask as opposed to her master. After all, since the Mask was once the chief handmaiden and favoured dancer of Slaanesh, it would make some degree of sense for Drake to seek out his quarry within the Palace of the Pleasure God. In addition, Drake was implied to have retained his sword upon disappearing, a weapon almost identical to that wielded by the Silver Knight of Slaanesh, although it remains unclear as to whether or not Drake's own blade was inscribed with runes or any other such engravings. The only major problem with this particular possibility, however, is that Drake's armor was torn apart and left where he supposedly fell within the material realm, whereas the knight that wandered throughout Slaanesh's domain was stated outright to be clad in silvered armor. This could potentially be explained by the Purifier utilizing his psychic abilities and spiritual fortitude to create a very literal set of spiritual armor for him to wear whilst within the realm of chaos. After all, as mentioned earlier, the Purifiers are able to envelop both their bodies and souls with a purifying aura that is anathema to demonkind, and as such, it's entirely possible that within the depths of warp space, such an ability could very well clad the warrior in a set of spiritual armor in a very real sense of the word. In either case, if the Silver Knight of Slaanesh was indeed truly a Grey Knight, then one can only imagine as to what could happen should the chapter ever encounter this warrior upon the battlefield. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.